So we're going to be starting a new unit, and in this new unit, we need to identify prerequisite skills that we need to start with. But first, let's tell you what you're going to learn about. In this new unit called Quadratics Part 1, we're going to learn about constructing a table of values and graphing quadratic relations. We're also going to determine how to interpret meaningful values of variables given the graph of a quadratic equations. We're going to also understand what the roles of A, H, and K are in this equation, which is what we call the vertex form of a parabola. You'll find out about that as we go along. Now, the key words that I want you to make note of is the concept of a mathematical model, the vertex form, the maximum, the minimum, the parabola, and a word called the vertex. All of these words are keywords that I want you to focus on during the unit. Now, one of the key concepts that we have to study for this concept is a thing called algebraic skills. And with algebraic skills, we need to understand how to do a thing called substitution. So that has something to do with this thing where I say, find the value of y when x is equal to 0. And now, if x is equal to 0, I want to know what y is going to be in this first equation. So in this equation, we have y is equal to negative 2x squared minus 3. So when we're trying to find out what the value of y is, what we have to do is we literally have to say y is equal to negative 2, and we replace our x with the value of 0. And you notice this in a bracket, squared minus 3. And, well, 0 squared is 0, and 0 times anything is 0. So that means we have negative 2 times 0. And then minus 3, which is 0, minus 3, which gives us negative 3. So when x is 0, y is negative 3. And we can do the same for each of these equations that we have here. But when we do the substitution, we must substitute x equals 0 in. Pause the video and try part B, and I'll show you my solution. And so now, for y is equal to negative 2, x minus 3 squared, this is what we get. Now, when we simplify the bracket, we have 0 minus 3. Simplify the bracket, 0 minus 3 gives us minus 3. And now we have minus 3 squared in the brackets. That gives us positive 9 because it's just minus 3 times minus 3, which gives us y is equal to negative 2 times 9, which gives us y is equal to negative 18. So now let's do the same for y is equal to x plus 2 squared minus 3. Let's do that substitution. Pause the video, do it, and I'll show you my solution. And following the same pattern as we did last time, simplify the bracket where we have 0 plus 2 to give us 2, and then 2 squared gives us 4, and then 4 minus 3 gives us 1, and we are done. And now let's move on to the next concept. So now imagine we have, instead of x being 0, we're going to let x be another number other than 2. This is where we're still going to have to use that bracket when we substitute our x value in and then simplify. The numbers will come out different, but it's almost the same. The work is almost the same, I mean. All right, so for y is equal to 5x squared plus 2, we're going to substitute directly in. So we're going to get y is equal to 5. We substitute our negative 2 in for x squared, and we end up with plus 2. Now, we have to simplify this. We have to do the exponent of this. So negative 2 all squared gives us a value of 4, right? Then we multiply it by 5 and then add the 2. Okay, so now we have to literally multiply this out using BEDMAS, and we end up with y is equal to 20 plus 2. And then we end up with y is equal to 22 as our final answer. All right, now let's do the same for y is equal to 5 bracket x plus 2 squared. And all we're going to do is we're going to follow the same pattern as before, where we substitute wherever our x is with a bracket with the number, and we'll see what happens. So now, when we do this, we're going to get y is equal to 5 bracket -2 in brackets plus 2 squared. Now, we have to simplify the bracket, right? And we go, all right, -2 plus 2 gives us, well, 0 squared. So we have 5. Y is equal to 5 times 0 squared. That's really just y equals 5 times 0, which is 0 as our final answer. And so now I'm going to pause the video. I want you to pause the video and try number 3, see if you get a good answer. Go. And so now when we do the substitution for part 3, we start with -3x plus 12 squared plus 1. So now when we substitute, we literally have to replace all our x's with -2 in brackets. So we need to now go and take that -2 and 12 and add those together. And what do you get? -2 and 12 gives us -3 bracket 10 and then square it plus 1. So 10 squared gives us 100, so we'll simplify in the next line. And now we must take -3 and 100, multiply them together to get -300 plus 1. And simplifying, we end up with -299. So we have to remember that we need to get, so we have -299 for x is equal to -2. And just take a moment and look back on that. So remember, if I have x is -2, then I've got y being -299. So essentially it allows us to present points of interest for a graph if we ever need them. So our next concept is to graph by doing this. Taking the table of information and determining the slope and the y-intercept, right? And all we're going to do is we're going to go and do something like this. For each one of these x's, think about what we did before. If we had an x, we're going to take our number of x is 15 and we're going to plug it into this line, this equation which represents a line, okay? And we just plug that in and we get a number. Now, for example, if I think of it as though it was subbing, all we're doing is plugging the number in and simplifying. That's all. So remember, when we were doing subbing before, all we did was put x in for 15 that we have right here, right? And we just plugged it into this equation, and then we simplified and solved, right? So now in doing so, you're going to get y is 12 for the first one, for the first block. Subbing again, you're going to find out that when I sub 20 in, you're going to get 9, 6, 3, and 0. And so now let's go and do the first difference. So if I do the first difference, I'm going to take 9 and subtract 12. So 9, so we always take the bottom minus the top. So 9 minus 12 gives us -3. And then 6 minus 9 gives us -3. And 3 minus 6 gives us -3. And 0 minus 3 gives us -3. Now, let's do some analysis of this graph. So original graph is this. Y is equal to -0.6x plus 21. All right, now, you know from our past work with math that we had y is equal to mx plus b, where the b in our equation was what we called the y-intercept, and then this was the slope. Okay, now the y-intercept for our new graph that we have here of -0.6x is 21. So the y-intercept is going to be 21. So I'm just going to plot that on my graph, and I'm going to put y is 21. Now, if I want to find the x-intercept, all I have to do is I have to find where y is equal to 0. And if I look here, y is equal to 0, then x has to be 35. So it looks like our point is 35 out here on the x-axis. So now all we have to do is draw a line between here. That's our line. Now remember that if we have the first differences all the same, this is a linear relation. Okay? Now, based on what we studied before in grade 10, you know that this was our slope and this was our y-intercept. So that means that this part here is the y-intercept, not the y-intercept, the slope of our line. In this case, the slope is negative 0.6, and the y-intercept is 21. And we're done. Okay, for this next problem, we need to identify the slope and the y-intercept of a line. So here's the thing that we need to remember, that the equation of a line is equal to y is equal to mx plus b, right? Now, what you have to find is the slope and the y-intercept. So let's go and find the slope first, which is the rise divided by the run. Now, in order to find the rise and run, we need to find some points on our graph that cross at one of these hashes. Now, when you go and take a look at this graph, this step here, you'll notice that you go 8 up and 6 across. Okay, so that means my rise is 8 and my run is 6. Now, that is not the appropriate form for our rise and run. So that is actually going to be both divided by 2 to get an answer of 4/3 for our final answer for our slope. Now, the y-intercept is this point here that crosses the y-axis. And in this case, the b value is going to be -8. Because I can read that point on my y-axis, and that's where my line crosses. So remember, this is our basic equation. And then you would say, therefore, the line is y is equal to, well, m, which is 4/3x, and then -8 is the final equation of that line. And we're done. Now pause the video and try to do the same for the next equation that we have here. And that is question B. It's not an equation, it's a line. Go for it. Okay, for this one, I noticed that this point is my y-intercept. So I'm going to actually put down my y-intercept is -7. And I notice that my graph actually goes up a certain amount and then crosses. If I go up a certain amount and then over. So this is up 3 and back 1 and back -1. So our rise is 3, but our run is -1. So our final answer is just -3 for our rise over run. So that means our equation is -3x minus 7. And we're done. All right, now the work that I have for you is clearly laid out on the sheets. You're just going to be doing questions that you have seen so far. All right, good luck, guys.